Welcome to Story Chats at Inspy Romance. I'm Elizabeth Madry, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Narelle Atkins.
And Valerie Comer.
Jaycee Weaver is back with us today to talk about the enemies to lovers trope. So thank you for joining us, Jaycee.
Thanks for having me.
What is it about enemies to lovers that made you want to come and chat with us today?
I think I have been a sucker for this trope since I was a middle schooler, actually. In my rom-coms that I watch every now and then, it's still just my favorite. I love something about the tension and the animosity and how they have to overcome that, and how easy it is to find that you've got two people who so fervently believe something, and usually one or both of them are wrong. And so I love seeing that get smoothed out, and yet it still sparks that little bit of chemistry, even it's right there under the surface, even when they don't like each other.
I like that. That works for me. So let's talk, maybe it sort of leads in well into what we mean by enemies, because I feel like there are a lot of ways we could interpret that that word or that aspect of this trope. And also, as you're talking, is enemies to love the same as hate to love? I often hear them used interchangeably. So is it the same or is it not the same? What do you think? Valerie, do you want to go first?
I would think so. I guess I take a fairly broad definition of the enemies part. So for me, I would, just when I was thinking over this question, I thought there's kind of two angles that you can come at this from. And one is if they've got a history together and something happened, either they were together once and something came between them, or they always hated each other, like and then and so now we're having a romance, so good luck with that. Or they've just met, like in chapter 1 is their meet cute, and you're like, okay, why would they like instantly clash against each other? So I think there's those two ways, and they can play out really differently, but ultimately I think there's a lot of similarity in them.
Narelle, what about you? What do you think?
Well, what Val said. So I think the shared history, and often that can go back to childhood or high school. I found a sort of a theme of that. And then the other one, when they first meet, that can often be circumstances. So they're pitted against each other because what they want and their goals are basically, it's a win-lose. They both can't win. Someone wins and someone loses. So I see it as the shared history issue, or it's the win-lose on their goals and what they want in the story.
Okay. All right, Jaycee?
I think you have very valid points. I think there can be so many different ways that it can be approached. But the essential core has to be that there's the animosity with the chemistry.
Yeah.
Because you figure love and hate, they are two sides of the same coin, and they say it's a very fine line between the two, that the opposite is not one or the other, it's apathy. So they're related.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess I see a slight difference between hate to love and enemies to lover. Although, I mean, I can see using them interchangeably, but I think you can be enemies with someone without necessarily hating them. If they're just, I don't know. Now I'm trying to come up with an example of how, and I'm drawing a blank.
I think what Jaycee said there plays into that, though, because let's say they're both going for one prize and only one of them is going to win. They don't have to hate each other.
True.
They're gonna like try and sabotage each other and whatever, but it won't come necessarily out of a place of hatred. It'll come out of a place of, that's my prize and I'm gonna get it.
So I wonder, is opponents versus enemies maybe is a more correct way,
and that one
it, for all that. I mean, the trope is not called opponents to love, so we'll stick with enemies, but that's a good point. That's a good point. All right. I like
Yeah,
that.
well, they have to, if they're going to be enemies, they have to get to, if they're going to end up with a happily ever after, they then have to transition out of enemies to working together in some kind of cooperative way to then falling in love. You don't just fall in love with your enemy. So it just doesn't work.
No.
Yeah.
When you're looking at, if you just like line up 50 romances in a row and look through them, how many of them are going to have that instant attraction thing, and how many are going to have the instant repelling thing, which is what we're talking about today? And are there any other ways to start? Is there a way to start a story with them indifferent to each other?
I mean, I think
Silence.
so. I think so. I think a lot of friends to more start out with them certainly romantically indifferent to one another.
Right. Okay.
Now they obviously are friends, but they don't even have to be besties sometimes with friends to more. They're just in the same,
hanging out in the same crowd.
They know each other. That's about all. That's all they got going for them, is they know each other. So I think you can. I think you can have that sort of indifference.
And then
that can be stranded together. When they're stranded together somewhere, that's where I think that's where I think you can really see that indifference, because they're forced to confront each other. They can't just ignore each other. So some people's default, if they don't like someone, is to ignore them. But if you're stranded in a snowstorm or on an island or in a car traveling somewhere or whatever, and you can't avoid that person, then you actually see what's really going on in the relationship.
I can see that. Yeah. But that's not enemies to lovers, and that's why we're here.
Well, it can be a combo. Like, tropes usually don't stand on their own. Like, there are very few books that just have a single trope without a mashup of a few other different things. So I think stranded together and enemies to love can be a match, if that makes sense, that authors have used, and can be quite fun in stories.
I can see that.
There's no one I would rather not be stranded with than you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like if Tom Hanks really hated volleyballs, then that I just made that movie so much worse.
Is that really possible though? I mean,
I'm not a fan of volleyball. I don't know. I don't think Wilson and I would have been friends. All right, so let's dive into books. We're going to talk about good enemy to love CCR, and we're going to start with Valerie. Pick one off your list.
Well, I have recently read Beyond the Tides by Liz Johnson.
That was on my list too.
How was it?
I too have recently read this book.
We have recently read this book because we recently did a podcast with Liz. But so this couple knew each other in high school, but there wasn't ever a romance between them. So it doesn't fit that little niche. Something happened, as always seems to be the case. Something happened to turn them into enemies. And Meg has hated Oliver ever since. And he deserved it to a degree. Like, what he did wasn't absent-minded or thoughtless. It was something he did on purpose, out of a place of pain. But what I found interesting about this particular one is that Meg could really hold a grudge like just about nobody else I've ever heard of. So it took an awful lot to get her kind of wrapped around to where she could see anything good in Oliver at all.
Yeah. Her sense of proportion, I felt I struggled with probably the good first 65% of that book, because Meg's sense of proportion was, I felt so off. I'm like, you would rather ruin your life because you're mad at him. Like, I get if you hate someone that you don't want to see them succeed, but I don't see torpedoing your own life because you're just bound and determined to make sure that they never get anything good in their life. And Meg, that's sort of how she started out.
Yes, pretty much.
So it was hard for me to read because I'm like, girl, you need therapy, possibly
her
a
by the
good
shoulder.
shake, like a really hard shake, maybe several really hard shakes.
But on the other hand, I mean, as a mum who has older teenage children, and my daughter's in her last year of school at the moment, the amount of pressure that is on my daughter in terms of what you do, what you score, your results are going to determine the rest of your life.
Sure.
I can see why you could carry that failure to get to that Ivy League uni college because of this particular incident. I can see why that would actually have an impact on her, because I think our education system is really priming young people to think, if I fail my last year at school, my life is a failure. Yeah. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. It's just so much angst, I think. And I think there's more angst that I'm watching my kids experience than I actually experienced when I finished high school. And hopefully it's a unique Australian thing and you guys may not have all this pressure and stress, but
no, they do.
I can, So to be fair, I could actually see why she can carry that. And why it's still a big deal, even though I'm not that type of person. Like, I would get over it. But I can see why certain personality types put into a certain situation could really hold on to, he ruined my life. That was my opportunity. That was my one chance to go for gold, and he took it from me. So, I can see both sides of it.
Young people have this sense. I don't know if you remember, but I vividly remember how everything as a teen just feels so big and so long and so monumental that just one little thing, and you really look back now that, the 40s have hit and you're like, that was like a 4-month-long relationship. And yet it still feels like it was years of your life when you think about it, because it felt so big. And so for her to be able to capture that, that's pretty awesome. Even though it feels unrealistic to us now, when you're living in those shoes as a young person, it feels monumental. So
I wouldn't say it felt unrealistic. I think almost it was too realistic. And that's that's why I struck, because I do know people in my own world who are like that. Now they're very mentally ill, but but
if you're not listening,
right? Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. But no, that was realistic, and I get that people do that, but I also wish that they didn't do that in real life too. It's like, let's step back and find perspective, just for 5 minutes. Let's try. But it definitely fits enemies to lovers. It is a fabulous choice for enemies to lovers.
Thank you.
I now have added it to my TBR. So.
Yeah.
And it's a fun story. And and once you start to find out why it's not just what happened in high school. It's like, that's the icing on the cake, or the straw that broke the camel's back, in a way. There's a whole lot of other things that have happened in her life. And so when we first meet her, she's at a point of pretty major emotional stress with what's happening with her mum, and there's a whole lot of stuff. So once you look at the sort of complete person and the whole baggage, you can actually see why it makes sense. Well, I could anyway. So I really enjoyed that book.
All right, Narelle, pick another one.
Well, Beyond the Tides was the first one. So I'm going to jump to Star Rising by Janet Ferguson. So this one is probably more a circumstance, enemies to love, rather than having any shared history. So Star, who is the heroine in the story, she's a companion to the hero's mother. And her mother's not well. I'm not going to go too much into detail on the story because I've talked about this one a few times now. And so Star ends up accompanying her boss on a tour of Ireland, and the boss's son is really questioning her motives and what's going on there with this relationship that this employee has with his mum, and doesn't trust her, and he basically gate crashes their tour of Ireland. So and she really resents the fact that he thinks that she's, she thinks that he's got dodgy motives. Yeah, like she's really offended that he thinks that she's not a good person. So that sort of enemies and sort of that enemy situation is set up by the circumstances. And as they get to know each other, then obviously things start to change. But it's a really fun story because it really has that great enemies to love dynamic where they start off not liking each other for a certain reason, and then they fall in love as they actually get to start to know each other.
That's a good choice, that story.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. I think that's one of those things that we love about that makes enemies to lovers such a great trope, is that we love to root for the underdog. And so you're always picking and choosing when you're reading, and sometimes they're both the underdog because they're both, you know, being treated badly by the other person. And so you're rooting for them not only to get over themselves, but you're rooting for them to figure it out. You're rooting for them to get together. You're rooting for them to see the truth. And so you have that little piece of us that just loves to cheer for the underdog. And I think that's a really big part of why it's such a great trope.
Yep.
Definitely.
So I chose Unkissable by Jaycee Weaver. Maybe you've heard of it.
Heard of it.
That's also on my list.
And I like the fact that in this one, while they're enemies, but not like, he has grown past it, even though he's sort of like, I've forgiven her. I don't want her back in my life at all, ever. Like, may she rot in California and I never see her again. but it's not active. And so when he's like, when the chance to help her, she needs some help, he doesn't step away. He's like, God, really? Are you really doing this? And then God's like, yeah, I'm really doing this. And he's like, dang it. So he does, but he's not, so they're not picking at each other the whole time, which sometimes with enemies to lovers, it's too much picking at each other. And it's like, okay, y'all need to start working through this any minute now.
Coach
so
Elizabeth is telling you how to do this.
Yes. So there's not that overwhelming extended picking at each other, which to like the mom of a teenager, I'm like, I don't have to read this. I could put my book down and I would hear it. So, you know, so I liked that because he's still just like, oh, I despise everything she stands for, but I'm going to try to find the good here because I really feel like God has told me I have to. And it's just a really powerful story of redemption, which I think from a CCR perspective, if you're going to do enemies to lovers, you've got to get to the redemption in some way, or you're missing what could be amazing.
Yeah.
No, I agree. That was a fun one, a good one. Yeah.
Yep. All right, Jaycee.
So mine, the one that I picked actually isn't CCR. I picked a clean romance from Emma St. Clair, The Falling for Your Enemy, that she just came out with last week or the week before.
Yeah.
I have devoured that entire series because it's just so good. The unusual characters are amazing. And I just loved this one because she and he both did something to the other one out of their own individual hurt. And the hurt ran deep, but it was completely blown out of proportion by other people thanks to social media and the media. So I loved that. And then they were thrown into a situation where they have to take a road trip together and figure things out. And it's just disaster after disaster after disaster. And it's moment after moment after moment where they have to figure out, is she still being a jerk to me? But this doesn't match with what I'm seeing in person. And so you got all these things that could make it such a monumental disaster, but they're still fighting the fact that they know the person that they're getting to know isn't probably who they thought.
Yeah.
Cool.
But she holds on to it every time. They get a little bit further ahead and then, oh, but maybe not. So, and I love that. I love the tension and the give and the take and the push and the pull. That's always
and in that one, I've read that one as well, in that whole series. And part of it too is it's been set up through the previous books, right?
Yeah.
So you're not walking into it cold at the beginning of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know why they.
Exactly. Yeah, it was fun.
Do you have another one, Valerie?
Oh, sure. I've got a list. I can keep adding to it all day here. I'm going to go with Longing for Lily by Tara Grace Ericson. And it's actually, yeah, it's a similar thing, that there was something that happened in the past, only this time there had been a relationship. But Josh doesn't know what happened to blow things up 12 years ago. Boy, we can hold grudges, can't we? He knows that they were dating and that he failed her, but he doesn't realize how much. He doesn't realize what secrets she's holding. So I'm gonna leave it kind of with that. But she is on a no way, we're staying apart. I can't let you close. I can't let anyone close. And that kind of is the pressure that puts them together, because I think that there has to really be a strong reason for them to need keep being in each other's life, in this trope in particular, all of them, but this one demands it, because otherwise they're gone, like magnet ends that repel, right? So she runs an event barn and does weddings, and he's a wedding photographer and he's the popular photographer, and so they wind up working together over and over, and she's just trying to keep him at arm's length. And well, you know what, it's a romance novel and it doesn't work really well.
Indeed.
But there's a lot of tension in there as you try and figure out what exactly all went on in there.
Yep, that's a good one. I'm going to go next before Narelle can steal my next one, because she and I.
Oh, let's see. Have you picked?
She and I sometimes overlap. And
all right, let's see. Let's see if you pick the one that I've left till. I've got two more, but this was probably I think you're going to say one of them.
Probably. We'd been off the Kara Isaac train for a while, but we're getting back on the Kara Isaac train. You could pick a number of them.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the one with Victor, whose name I've now forgotten, but I'm not picking that one. Even though Victor is an absolutely horrible human being who then becomes
cheating
a reasonably good human being.
I could talk about this one, but I'm not. Isn't that
I'm
cheating?
not, because I don't remember the title, but I will look up the title and put it in the show notes. But I went with my favorite, with Then There Was You, which is absolutely enemies to lovers. Because he is just determined to think the worst of everything. He starts out with assumptions, and then he builds all his future feelings on those assumptions that were wrong. And so it just becomes this whole thing. And she's just like, what did I ever do to you? You're such a jerk, because he's just such a jerk to her. And she's like, what on earth? I literally just got in the country. I don't understand why you're being this way. And he's just made assumptions and then piles onto them. And so then unraveling those and picking them apart, and him getting to see who she really is, and her finally realizing, like, wait, you thought what? Makes a really fun ending where they're figuring it out after having become friends sort of in spite of each other. So that's part of, I think, what makes that book so fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But we kind of fangirl about that book. I don't know if anyone has anything new to say about it.
I think it was for like everything.
Yeah.
And I think it was when they briefly left Australia and went somewhere else in the story. I think that's when it really started to unpack the enemies to love, and things really started to change.
Yeah.
It was a very well written book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hers tend to be.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Narelle.
Okay, well, I actually remembered another one, but I'll go with one of the original ones I had, which is Love and Other Mistakes by Jessica Kate. So the setup, I won't go into too much detail. I have talked about it before, but Jeremy is basically Natalie's ex-fiance, and he basically, in chapter 1, he turns up in her life again, pretty much ruins her chance of doing something really important with her job at the very beginning of the story. and she absolutely hates him, like hate. It's pretty much the I hate you trope on steroids, this book. And it's so much fun. And at times I get very frustrated with the I hate you trope, but I keep reading it because I like seeing how it all sorts itself out. So I'm just, as long as that by the 50% mark, as long as I'm halfway through and it's starting to turn and we get past the sniping and all the rest of it, then I'm okay. Yes, so that's a really fun story if you haven't read it, by Jessica Cade. And a lot of her, pretty much most of her books have, she really likes writing the enemies to love trope. So if you're a big fan of enemies to love, look up Jessica Cade's books.
Yeah, I have to say, as an author, it's a lot of fun to write that sniping. You know, the words just flow.
I don't like it. I'm just like, go to your room, both of you, until you can be kind.
So you're not going to enjoy reading and beta reading my next, just so you know.
I don't mind reading it. I just don't like writing it. I'm just like, one of you has to behave. Somebody choose to be the bigger person, please.
I'll let my characters know.
Yeah,
yes,
I know.
Not that they're listening.
Can you really control what they're doing? I mean,
no.
I just record.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Jaycee, you said you only had the one. Did you think of one while we were talking?
No, because I'm just enjoying agreeing, and I'm filling out my list of.
Get your TBR growing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really surprised. I have another one that no one's mentioned, and I'm super surprised by this. And that's the trouble with love by Toni Shiloh, because she really finds him annoying and painful at the beginning, and then when he's stuck living in the apartment in New York City, and he's this annoying person that she's known since high school.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was another one I enjoyed.
That was excellent.
I think she's got a couple of others as well whose names are escaping me, but in the Freedom Lake series, which
yes,
I think you're
long
correct.
ago for them to be fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a few. I wish that my title amnesia was not such a real thing.
We all suffer from that.
So the solution to this is you have a blog with book recommendations where you tag things really, really well. So when you do a search of your own blog, you can find it and jog your memory. That's the solution to it. That's my Narelle solution. Fixes amnesia.
We probably should wrap up. We're nearing our time. Final enemies to lovers thoughts. I feel like we have to at least mention one movie, which is 10 Things I Hate About You, because that is sort of the quintessential hate to love early 90s rom-com plus
Aussie hero.
Well, and it's older than that because it's just Taming of the Shrew. So
right, yes. Which there is a really fabulous is it Emma Thompson? It's probably Emma Thompson. It's always Emma Thompson. There's a fabulous movie version of that as well with Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson, because it's got to be Emma Thompson. It's always Emma Thompson. Or Kiss Me Kate, which is the 50s version that they did of Kiss Me Kate, which is fantastic as well. I mean, that's sort of like the original, the OG hate to love, right there.
Oh yeah. Any version of that, I am down for that.
Yeah, me too.
It's always so much fun. Yeah.
All right. So other than Shakespeare, finally, final thoughts. It's good to end with Shakespeare. Jaycee, thank you for joining us. It's always fun to have you. Remind us where we find you.
Like everywhere. So I'm on Inspi Romance this coming next week with my latest blog there, and I'm always on Facebook. You can find me on jayceeweaver.com, although I don't really blog because Inspi is about all I can handle doing once a month.
Yep.
I'm not a blogger.
Perfect.
But I love being everywhere else. So
excellent. Do you have any books coming out soon?
I do. Come September 14th, my Braver with You is a Friends to More engagement romance in that collection with save the date authors. It's gonna be lots of fun.
Okay.
And then later this Christmas season, I'll have a book inside of the 2021 Christmas Lights collection. So
Awesome.
Thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us at Story Chats. Let us know your thoughts. What did we miss? Because we probably missed some. Narelle has a big list that we didn't even get to. So he'll probably let us know the ones that are filling out Narelle's list.
Have more
Valerie
too.
has a big list. We
I
got to all the
need
ones on
to
my
build
list.
my list.
So
So send me all the titles.
leave us comments on our YouTube or over on the Story Chats Facebook page. We love to hear from you. You can find information about the podcast at inspiromance.com/storychats. And if you are watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And in the meantime, we'll see you next week. Don't forget to fall in love with a good book. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.